Hey, everybody, welcome to one of the most exciting episodes of Back to School. We have a world champion, Nathan Chen, three-time figure skating champion, Olympic bronze medal winner. This guy is the real deal. I'm so excited to have him on our show today. He's here today, first of all, to tell us what it takes to become a world champion. Secondly, he's going to break down all of the skating moves for us. He's going to tell us about the different jumps, how there's where you can do one spin, you can do two spins, three spins, four spins, but no one's ever done 5 spins. Will he be the one to do it? And lastly, he's going to tell us if you really want to make money, become a figure skating choreographer. That's where the money's at. All of that and more right now on Back to School with Maz Jobrani.
Maz Jobrani, hey, Jobrani Maz, oh, Maz Jobrani, hey, Jobrani, Mazzy, oh, Maz, hey, I got a podcast, oh, Back to School, yeah.
All right, I am super excited about today's episode. I'm Maz Jobrani. I'm your host on Back to School with Maz Jobrani. With me, my sidekick, Tehran. How are you, T?
I'm here for it. Nathan Chen is our boy.
Dude, what an exciting day to have an actual world champion. I'm not talking about like former world champion. I'm talking about 2021 three-time figure skating world champion. From what I read, that's not a feat that is accomplished easily. I'm pretty sure he's either the first one to do it or it's a very rare feat. So this dude is the real deal. He's here today. He's got some inspirational stories and very interesting, very humble, very sweet. Now, let's take the fans back to how we even stumbled into Nathan Chen. So, as everybody knows, we've been on lockdown for a year and a half. And maybe a few months ago at the Irvine Improv, Tehran and I do our first live indoor shows in Southern California. And I'm sitting in the back. And the way they do it at the Irvine Improv at that point, since we were coming out of the pandemic, they had limited seating. It was something like 20% of capacity or something. So Tehran, anyone who's been to our live shows knows Tehran does a lot of crowd work, gets to know who's in the audience. Tehran had been talking to some people, a table of young people, and he talked to them. And then he comes back to the green room before I go on stage. And you come up to me and you go, hey, man, there's a figure skating champion in the audience. And I had no idea. I don't follow figure skating. I had no idea. I was like, when you say figure skating champion, do you mean like the champion of Irvine? Like what level champion are we talking? And you were like, I think world. And I was like, oh, okay. But I didn't put two and two together. So I go on stage and I start talking to the table. And there's 4 of them there, Nathan and 3 other figure skaters. And I go, so who's the champion here? And they start pointing at Nathan. I go, so what kind of champion are you? He's like, and he's so humble. He's like, world. And I was like, when you say world, do you mean
What world? Which world?
Because I couldn't believe that the world figure skating champion is at our comedy show. Like, why are you at our comedy?
It happens all the time. You'll meet someone, they'll be like, yeah, I want a beauty pageant. Where? On Instagram. Like, it's not. We were talking about world champion. It'd be like if Miss Universe was there, or if LeBron was there, or if Serena was there. You're talking big things here.
And also as comedians, sometimes we're like, why is that person at my show? Like one time, I'll be honest, I was at the Irvine Improv. Seth MacFarlane, who's the creator of American Dad, I think, or what, Family Guy.
Seth MacFarlane.
He's
huge. All of it.
Yeah,
yes.
He was I was at the Melrose Improv. He was at the Melrose Improv with a date at my show. And it is my show. It's like I'm headlining. So it's my fans who come. And I was like, oh my God, is Seth MacFarlane a fan of mine?
Yeah.
And so people were coming up to me from the club going, oh, Seth MacFarlane's here. And I was like, oh, he's here to see me. Maybe he's going to do an animation movie or a show around me. Well, as it turns out, one of my closest friends is Alex Borstein, who does the voice of the mom on the show. So I just, after the words, I texted her, I go, hey, Seth MacFarlane was at my show. Do you know if he's a fan? And she's like, let me find out. And then she hits me back. She's like, no, he was just on a date and they ended up. I was like, oh, damn.
You were gonna
So
have an Iranian American dad. That was gonna be a whole thing. Iranian American dad.
my career was going to take off. It didn't. But the point
Ah,
is, that night when Nathan was at the show, what a sweet, sweet gentleman. And we reached out and he agreed to be on the show. And I'm so excited. Tehran, how do you feel talking to Nathan?
I mean, it's interesting and it's exciting to actually meet a person or know a person that possibly will win an Olympic gold in this upcoming Olympics. That is a real thing. Here's a person who's got the longest streak in ice skating, a person who's dedicated their life, plus has already won medal, has already medaled in the Olympics. So that's interesting. And the amount of dedication it takes is actually very inspiring.
Absolutely. I'm so excited. And we also have a guest question today because usually Dara asks a question, but as it turns out, my Dara's one of Dara's closest friends, his name is Cooper Cornwell. Let me make sure I get his last name right.
Last name, you should have just stuck with Cooper.
Well, Cooper
It's
is hold
Coop,
on. Let me just
Coopity
do
Coop.
hold on. I'm gonna fix that. I'm gonna have her fix that as well. Cornwell, yeah. Um, well, also we have a guest question today because usually Dara or Mila asked the question or Cameron has asked the question, but today one of my son's closest friends, Cooper Cornwell, is a young aspiring figure skater. And when I said Nathan Chen is on the show, his face just lit up. He's like, "Oh my god!" And I go, "Do you want to ask the question?" And he said, "Yes, I do." So you listeners and viewers are going to be introduced to a new questionnaire. You know what I'm saying? Person asking a question, and it's a great episode. I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you share it. I hope you subscribe. Please give us reviews wherever you're watching it. If it's on YouTube, give us some good reviews. If it's on iTunes, wherever, give us 5 stars. Let's grow this bad boy. And without further ado, Tehran, how do people reach you?
And I am Tehran all across the board.
I'm at Maz Jobrani. We're currently on tour. Go to mazjobrani.com. We'll be in Texas. We'll be in Florida. We'll be in Vegas. We're going to be all over the country.
Yeah.
mazjobrani.com. Come join us. Now let's go talk to 3-time world champion figure skater Nathan Chen on Back to School with Maz Jobrani.
Back to school, yeah.
Hey guys, if you are like me, you are always on the go. You're hustling, trying to make it happen. What do you need? You need a beverage to keep you going mentally. I got it for you. It's called Brain Fuel. BREINFUEL. This stuff is great, keeps you mentally focused. And right now, if you go to brainfuel.com, you can enter the code SCHOOL to get 15% off. Give it a try. See what you think. It's brainfuel.com. BREINFUEL.com. Put in the word school. You get 15% off. Try it. Brain Fuel Cerebral Beverages is the drink for mental athletes. Check it out. Go! Nathan Chen, thank you for being on Back to School with Maz Jobrani. How you doing today, buddy?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, man. I'm so excited to have you. First of all, real quick story. We met you at a comedy show. So my first question, before I have the kids ask a question, do you go to a lot of comedy shows?
No, that was actually my first one since like the start of quarantine. Yeah.
Whoa.
You're my first one,
Wow. We're excited that happened, man. Well, thanks for coming to our show first. Nathan, today, the guests, the listeners don't know, but the question that's going to be asked usually is asked by my son, Dara. But today, his buddy Cooper is a young skater in training. I told him you're coming on. He was, so excited. And he asks this question of Nathan Chen.
Hi, Mr. Chen. I'm Cooper Cornwell, and I'm an ice dancer training in Novi. I was wondering, as a skater, how did competing affect your relationship with close family and friends?
Pretty deep. Yeah. Skating
Yeah,
is like
pretty deep for like a 12-year-old. Like what's
Yeah.
going on with Cooper? Maybe this was Cooper asking for help. Like, we need to talk to his family.
Cooper's
Oh,
wondering, man, wondering.
I feel that though. I mean, I left my hometown when I was 12. And I moved out with my parent or with just my mom, and I have 2 brothers, 2 sisters. So, they all went off to college at that point. So I wasn't like necessarily living in the house with them, but we were all really close growing up. So I felt like, going to I grew up in Salt Lake City and moved to California. And I think that through the move, like you do sort of lose contact with some of the people that you're close to and all of that. But I think that through the skating community in itself, like there are so many people going through that similar sort of adjustment, and we're moving across the country. Like I went to your comedy show with all of my closest friends. We're all skaters. We met each other through the sport. And I think through that, like you create a family outside of your own family. And I think that's like how I was able to adjust. And obviously it takes time because you're spending so much time in the rink, and you don't really have that much time outside of the rink to socialize and to meet new people. But I think that that shared both shared sort of sense of passion, as well as shared sort of just environment, allows people to sort of empathize with one another. And I think that that in itself helps facilitate a sort of community. And that's how basically how I got through it.
Well, that's a beautiful answer because I think that that tells everybody. I think not just young kids, but even adults when they want to make a big move to go somewhere else, we're always a little trepidatious. Am I going to find friends? Is something gonna, is my life ever going to be back to normal? And you're saying yes, when you go, especially when you have similar interests, you find these friends. Because that night when you guys came to the show, there was
Right.
four of you, and you're all skating champions. I mean, you're the champion, you know what I'm saying? But they're also there
Yeah.
with you. But they're all great skaters, and you guys are all friends. And it gives hope to people like Cooper and young kids.
That was the nicest way, Maz, of you saying they weren't as good as Nathan. Like that's literally like it was you. You're the champion. I mean, they also skate, quote
But
unquote, air quotes.
but they are. Nathan, tell us that you had four of you that night. So who the other three? What level are they at? Just curious.
They're also, so the other dude that was with me is an almost four-time Olympian. So he's pretty good.
almost, we use the word almost.
He's a three-time Olympian, and then training for this upcoming fourth one.
Yeah.
And then the other one is also aspiring Olympian, and then the other one is his wife, who I believe competed at the same. She's competed at the same senior level, but not at the Olympics quite yet.
So the only one that wasn't at the Olympics was the wife, but that's all good. So
Well, and the other
Birds
girl.
birds of a feather flock together. Steel sharpens steel. You're around those people.
well, let me ask you this. It's actually interesting because Tehran and I in the stand-up world,
Mhm.
people know you in the stand-up world. You go outside of the stand-up world, your fans know you. So like if I'm walking down the street, there's one side of Beverly Hills where there's a bunch of Persians, and they go crazy when they see me. I cross the street, nobody knows me. Now, as the three-time world champion figure skater walking around with a competitive skater, walking around with these other champion skaters, do you get recognized all the time, or are there times where you're like, oh, people don't know they're sitting next to the world champion?
I mean, I'm no LeBron, like people don't really follow. Skating is like low key enough, which honestly for me I kind of like, because like I never really wanted to do the sport for like popularity or fame. Like I loved it, and I liked doing it. I was good at it, and I like that's sort of the basis of why I was in the sport. It was never for like to be popular, to be famous. I think around the Olympics definitely like you get a little bit more notoriety. But generally speaking, skating's pretty undercover, and most people don't generally know that. Although it is different country to country though. Like in Japan, skating is huge right now. Like like the whole of Japan is just obsessed with skating. So anytime there's any shows or any competitions there, they recognize you more so than in the U.S. But yeah, in the U.S. it's pretty dead.
Well, that's another lesson to learn, which is do it for the love, not for the glory, right?
Yeah.
Actually, when we posted Nathan, I got messages from people in Iran that knew who
Really?
you were and were so excited
Oh,
that
man.
you were. It's like, how did you know Nathan? And there was a girl from Greece. It was very international with
Okay.
skating. Is skating an international sport,
That
or
was
is
good.
it localized to specific region?
I think generally it's where there's success. Like Japan right now is extremely successful, so there's a lot of people that are there supporting figure skating. But I think, yeah, fortunately, skating is a very international sport. So the fact that we travel all around the world for skating, I think, allows it to just reach really small corners of the world, and skating has a pretty broad grasp that way. So that's pretty dope.
I read that you started at the age of 3 using your sister's skates. Is that right?
Yeah, so I grew up in Salt Lake City, 3 years old, and I think honestly most of it was just that I grew up in like an Olympic environment. Like 2002 Olympics were held in Salt Lake City.
Ah.
I think through that, one, just like logistically, like there were rinks built around where I lived, so now I had access to ice. But also just like you see Olympics on the TV all the time. There's constant replays. There's constant like Olympians that are passing through your hometown, and I think that just sort of buzz and that sort of environment like really fosters this like sense of like, dang, the Olympics are sick, and especially as a young kid when you don't really have any general direction, you're like, all right, well, I go to school and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
And you're kind of trying to find like your identity and self outside of school, and obviously like your parents sort of facilitate that. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into skating in the first place. And none of my family members really skated. They like skated on the ice, but they never like competed or did anything with the sport. So, yeah, I don't know. It was honestly a really random occurrence, and I just happened to like find that I had talent in the sport pretty young. And I also tried other things, like I played hockey, I did gymnastics, I played piano and stuff like that. But beyond that, none of that was I was not really good at any of those other things. Just like skating for some reason stuck with me.
And so at the age of 3, you get on skates, you're like, "Oh, wow, I'm good at this." And I always say you get inspired by greatness and mediocrity. And
Right.
what I mean by that is when someone's watching you and you do some sick move,
Uh-huh.
there's some kid there watching you doing greatness and they go, "I wanna go do that." And then similarly, when they see somebody on the ice and they're barely standing and they're trying to, like, just stand, you
Right.
watch them, you go, "Well, if they can do that, I can do that." So greatness and mediocrity. And so you saw all these athletes going through, inspired by greatness, get out there. At what age did you decide to take it seriously? And at how many hours did you have to start putting in at that point?
Mhm. I didn't. Well, that's a good question. I mean, honestly, I didn't really start taking it super. I took it very seriously from the beginning, but also not that seriously relative to a lot of other elite athletes. I started skating pretty much every day, but like max 2 hours a day. And I think that generally speaking, like in your mind, people are like, oh yeah, like elite athletes probably spend like 4 or 5 hours on the ice. And I spend like very honestly bare minimum on the ice, but I did fill the rest of my day with a lot of other sports and a lot of other activities. So I think that was almost sort of my like cross training. And I was 3 when I started, and I like skated pretty consistently every day up until I was like 12, and then I moved to California when I was 12. So at that point, like, by the time I was 12, I was already pretty serious. I started competing. I wasn't really getting great results, but I wasn't bad either. Within Salt Lake City, within Utah, I was like one of the top skaters. And then across the country, I was like maybe top 10, top 8, so it wasn't like, I definitely felt like I had potential, but like obviously I hadn't realized any of that. And like honestly, not until like I had turned 15, 16 did I like actually recognize that like I had a shot to make the Olympics. And for skating,
Wow.
that's kind of like the end goal, like we have all these other competitions that are important, worlds, Grand Prix, but at the end of the day, we're trying to go to the Olympics, right? So that didn't really happen until I was like 16 or so.
That's another thing that I find as a great lesson for any parent listening to this or any kid listening to this, because my kids, Tehran knows, they play soccer, they play tennis, all of the above. And sometimes we get out in that club soccer world and these parents at the age of 10, 11, 12 are losing their minds. They're like, he needs to be on the competitive team or else he's not going to do. And I love the fact that it seems like when your mind was mature enough to recognize it is when you put it in a high gear and you started going. And then once you start going and you're doing now at the age of 15, 16, you're getting serious. How many hours a day do you have to basically forego school at that point? Do you drop out of school? Is it like an 8-hour day event? How much time does a champion skater have to put in?
Yeah, for sure. So by the time I was like 15, 16 was when I was like presumably around high school age. I moved on to online school when I was in ninth grade, just due to the hours. And yeah, at that point, then it's like we're at the rink from 9 to like 6 every day, and that's kind of the same schedule
Wow.
now. Obviously, we're not on the rink that whole time, but we're doing like off ice training, we're doing our on ice training, we're doing our warm ups, we're doing all this other stuff. But yeah, that's basically how the schedule went. And at that point, I think what's also important is that like my parents definitely really emphasize the importance of education. And I think that like enforcing that like skating will always kind of come secondary to school helped me be more of a kid, and I think that a lot of people pull their kids from like sort of, I don't know, these club soccer uh parents, they pull their kids, and I see this a lot in the rink, but they pull their kids when they're like in second grade or first grade, and then they like throw them in the rink for 5 6 hours a day, and I'm like, this kid has never developed any social skills. It's like their whole entire life is dependent on the rink. So like if they happen to succeed, that's great, but that's also a lot of pressure to make them succeed. And if they don't succeed, it's like, man, you kind of like you've only really researched one avenue. So I think I was really fortunate that my mom was like, okay, you're going to focus on skating, but as almost a side thing, as like this is an extracurricular. You're going to use this to get into college. And if you become successful, awesome. If you don't, at least you have this extracurricular that you sort of developed a passion for.
Well, Nathan, do you have like, and this is a question, you don't have to answer it,
Sure.
but do you have like adamantium in your bones, special mutant powers? Because a lot of people always think that there's a natural aptitude, and that is it. We use the term talent to dismiss the fact that we can all do something if we put our minds, hearts, and backbone into it. Do
Mhm.
you feel within reason that a lot of people could do what you have done if they dedicated and they inspired themselves the way you have?
The Malcolm Gladwell 10,000-hour rule is what you're
No,
asking about.
A hundred, a
absolutely.
hundred percent. I mean, the concept is the skate rinks in Salt Lake City is what allowed him. The Olympics was in Salt Lake. Skate rinks became available, and Nathan simply took advantage and utilized an opportunity which would maybe not have presented itself otherwise. But then there was that's also in the outlier, right? The concept, and then put in the hours. This didn't just happen overnight. 2 hours. When you were like, "Oh, I was only doing 2 hours." 2 hours is if I practiced the violin for 2 hours, I would be Yo Yo Ma. I would be Yo Yo Ma right now.
You'd be Yo Mama, Tehran.
Yo
Oh,
Mama.
boom. Got him. Go ahead.
No, I totally feel that. I think there's definitely like there is like a caveat to that. I think that like people have their talents, like, but I think you have to explore that. And for me, like, skating is not something that, I mean, I guess for the general population, skating isn't something that's entirely accessible at that level. There's a lot of finances, a lot of other things that come into play to allow a person to be able to skate like that. And I didn't grow up very wealthy. I grew up, with two brothers, two sisters, and we didn't really have that much money. But fortunately, Salt Lake City was like the skating was so cheap. It was like a couple dollars per session, whereas here in California it's like $30 for an hour. So like, dude, like if I grew up in Salt Lake City, or if I grew up in California, there's no way I would have been able to make it just because the price is just too steep. Um, and that's the thing. Like if we had 10,000 more rinks and they were all super cheap, I'm certain there would be some skater out there that would be way better than me. But the fact is that since we are limited, like there isn't as much exposure. So I think that, and that's another thing, like growing up with so many other skaters, you see skaters that work like tremendously hard, even more determined than I would ever be in my life, but they never really succeeded in the sport just because they didn't really have the inherent abilities to do that. And I'm not necessarily saying that like no one is able to, like I'm not saying that like, only very specific people can, but I think that, there's certain things that you should find that you're talented at. So I think it's great to be like diverse in what you're looking for, like if I went to skating and I wasn't great at that, try skiing, try swimming, try all these other things, And like
No,
I
hundred
fortunately
percent.
happen to be in a body that's like small and like adaptable to skating. Whereas if I was a lot taller, a lot, broader shouldered, I probably would be as successful in skating, So I think there are caveats to that, but generally speaking, like if you don't put in that work, I say it's like okay, it's like 30% like 30% talent and then 70% work, Like you have to have like the core, but if you don't put in that 70%, like you're not gonna be successful.
100%. LeBron James is 6'8". People love to be like, "Oh, LeBron's 6'8" or six. That's why. I know a lot of 6'8", 6'9" people who work at CVS part time and they just stock shelves. They do
Right.
nothing in the NBA. It's a combination of two, and I really like
Well,
that you said that.
I've been doing this joke, Nathan, on stage where when I talk to a doctor on, in the audience, and then I go, I should have been a doctor. And then I ask them, I go, do people say that to you? And they go, yeah. And I go, that's the stupidest thing people say because it's like, oh, it's like an overnight extension course to become a doctor. Like it's no big deal. So people say the same thing to us sometimes. I should have been a comedian or I should be a comedian. I go, yeah, 22 years of 7, 8 nights a week doing stand up. There's not 8 nights, but you know what I'm saying.
There are
Seven,
there are when you're a comedian, Maz. When you're that broke as a comedian, there are.
exactly. So similarly, I love what you're saying. Everybody that wants to do something, it's gonna take time. Nathan didn't wake up one day and they handed him a gold. No, he's been putting in the time.
Yeah.
And speaking of putting in the time, 2021 championships, Stockholm, Sweden. You're excited.
Yep.
And you went into the final round, I believe. You'd taken a fall earlier.
Yep.
Take us into the mind of a champion who's coming from behind right now.
Right.
And when you get on, like, what are you thinking? Is there any doubt, or what are you thinking when you get on that rink that day?
Yeah. I think that, from experience, the best times that I've skated are the times that like I set zero expectations for myself.
Mm,
And I think that like going into competitions that I haven't skated well, I felt like, there's expectations from parents, from family, from media, from coaches, from my US figure skating, all these different federations, like everyone's trying to play a role in that. And I think that once that happens, it's like you kind of lose sight of like what you're there to do, right? You're there to perform the best that you can. But also like recognize that, within my life, I only have maybe what at most 100 competitions or so, and that's probably like a larger estimate. So like within that period of time, like every competition that I have is like a pretty sick experience. Not everyone gets to have these opportunities. So if I'm so wrapped up in like, oh well, like what if I make this mistake? It's like you lose sight of actually being at that event, being like, damn, like there's so many amazing skaters here. There's so many amazing people here. Like we're sharing this like really awesome passion for this sport, and everyone's like, really excited. I think once I'm able to sort of tap into that sort of that mindset, it helps me get in a really like zen place before I start my program, where I'm like, okay, like regardless of what happens, like I'm here, this is sick, like I can do it. And then once that happens, like the ball starts rolling, and I start being able to like click into my elements. And I think going to the short program, I kind of tapped back into that old mindset of being like, this is like the world championship. This is a big deal. If you screw up, this will suck for your career. Screwed up, and I'm like, man, that didn't work. So gotta switch gears, and I think going to that last, we call it the free program, but yeah, the final round, it was a lot more just about like I'm already in a place where I'm not where I would like to be. So at this point, just truly just be present in this moment. And I think, for me that worked really well.
Man, that's the best advice you could give anybody with anything in life. I always tell them, as a stand-up comedian, I go, I do best when it becomes like surfing. I'm on the wave. I'm riding the wave of the crowd. I'm not worried about, oh, I forgot to do that bit. I got to do this bit. I'm just in the moment. I'm in Zen. And I love what you just said. Just be in the moment, because those expectations are what kill us. And those expectations, you're right, come from people that love us. Your parents are nervous. Your friends want this. Your coaches want that. And when you could just go, let me just appreciate where I am and do it. You go out there and you kill it, man. Wow. Nathan, what's a move that you, number one, love doing and you're like, I got this? And what's a move that you go, oh man, this is, if I could pull this one off?
That's a good question. Skating has a bunch of different jumps: axel, sow, toe, loop, flip, lutz. Of those jumps, 3 of them are toe, like you glide backwards and you slam your toe pick into the ice, and that like sort of like shoots you up in the air. And the other ones are like you just like dig into the ice on your edge, and that will propel you up into the air. I personally hate edge jumps. They sketch me out because you're like trying to get into like a really deep lean and like hoping that the blade will just like dig into the ice deep enough to propel you up. So those jumps always sketch me out. So there's a jump specifically called quad loop that has just always been like sketchy for me. But I really like toe jumps. So anything that's I'm tapping to the ice to pull me up into the air.
Nathan, you're giving away USA game plan here, buddy.
I know.
Like, oh, I don't do quad loops, and right now someone in China is like, quad loop. That is all we're doing is quad loops. He can't do a quad loop.
You got to push this out after the games, and then this is all good.
Is it called quad loop because you're spinning 4 times?
Yeah, so like there's axle through lutz, like I said.
Yeah, can you go through each jump and like let us know what each jump means and what they are? So axle's the first one.
Yep. So axle's the first one. It's most distinguishable because you take off forward. So anytime we're stepping forward and jumping in the air, that's an axle. Sow is sow cow. Sow cow is the full name. These are all named after like dead dudes. But sow cow is you're skating backwards and you're on your left foot and you like glide into it, so that's you're not tapping.
Oh, that's the one where people spin when they're going backwards and do the spin. That's kind of sow cow.
Yeah, exactly. So you're like gliding, boom, you rotate into the air, and all of these jumps start with single, 1 rotation, double, 2, 3, quad. No one's done a quint yet, but maybe we'll see that soon.
Quint at 5.
5 rotations, yeah.
Nathan will do a quint.
I mean, if they were actually, the funny thing is right now that's not even in the rule book. So if you did it, you would just get invalidated for it because they like don't know how to score it.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
But someone's gonna do it. There's gonna be a black athlete that does it because the black girls, they go through, I don't know why, and they do the jumps that no one can count, and then later it has to catch up. Simone Biles.
Yeah, exactly. No, if Simone did figure skating, she'd be doing quints right now for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then toe loop is also, all the rest of the jumps are all backwards, just on different feet. Honestly, they look pretty similar at that point. Toe loop is on the right foot, you're tapping with the left. Loop is you're on your right foot. So sow, you're on your left foot. Loop, you're on your right foot, and it's also an edge, you're not tapping. Flip and lutz look quite similar, except for one you're on an inside edge, one you're on an outside edge. That's basically those are the main differences. It's you have to like watch for a long time to be able to distinguish them. Even my family sometimes can't distinguish them, but yeah, those are the different elements.
My grandfather, of all people, this Iranian grandfather, he would watch ice skating and he would be like, he'd have me sit down. He didn't speak English, and he'd be like, "Come, come, come," and he's like, "Look at these people. They're so amazing." He loved ice skating, and because of him, whenever it's on, I
Yeah.
watch ice skating. I'm always like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah.
And how do you guys choose the music? Who choreographs the moves? How important does that play into winning a championship?
For sure. That's a big part of figure skating. That's the thing that like makes skating for me so interesting because it's like there is such a large athletic technical aspect. You know, like the long program is 410, so it's basically like a 410 sprint with like a ton of jumps. But then at the same time, you have to like skate to music and connect to the audience and connect to the connect to the judges and like interpret the music and this whole like artistic aspect of it too. But I think that there are, sort of like categories of skaters that both either really enjoy technique or really enjoy the artistic side. And I would definitely say more on the technique side. But you also have to recognize that 50% of the score is artistic. So like you have to really consider that when you're creating the idea. And so the elite skaters will generally like work. There's a couple like maybe 10 choreographers that are like known to be very good. And the one I've worked with her for the past like 6 or so years. But basically, it's generally her that comes up with the concept. So we kind of think about like what sort of idea do we want? Do we want to do, and what genre generally? Like, do we want something that's more classical, more contemporary, more hip hop, something that's a little bit more, uh, you know, something jazzy? It really depends on the season. We kind of like try to see what the landscape is doing. Like, what are the other guys doing? So it's like a little bit more unique and a little bit different. But at the end of the day, it's like whatever you feel comfortable doing, and for me, that's either more like along the lines of hip hop or modern contemporary movement. And those two I find are like the most easy for me to get to. And partially, like talking about that sort of like Zen feeling, like the music also helps a lot. If you click to the music right off the bat, it sort of initiates that sort of Zen feeling. But yeah, it's a process, and we're starting now, so roughly around May through July is when we get our new programs, and then our final competitions are like February and March.
And are you doing the same song and routine in multiple competitions leading up to the championship, or do you have 10 different routines ready to go?
We have two generally, so we have two programs per season. Most skaters do two new ones per season, and then we'll do that for the whole year. And then at the start of the next year, then we'll revamp and do something different, unless you have like a quote unquote masterpiece, and then you want to maintain that program. But I just get bored of my programs. Honestly, I get bored of listening to the same program. We have to train our programs every single day. So like you're in the rink and you listen to it for like an hour every day per song. An hour of one song and an hour of another song every single day. So it's like you have to find something that you really enjoy. And I personally have not found anything that I enjoy enough to listen to for more than 1 year. So yeah.
Dude, I can't even imagine. Tehran, I don't know if this happens to you, but sometimes I get a song in my head and it won't leave for like 2 days. So even when I get up to go pee in the middle of the night, it's in my head. I'm still going, whatever it is. If you don't want to see me dancing with somebody. And I'm like, oh, I used to like that song. Now it's killing me. You must have that happen to you all the time.
Yeah, exactly. I can't listen to any of the old songs that I skated to because it's just like I'm scarred.
Yeah, of course, you've been listening to him. Nathan, I'm going to ask the Persian parent question. How do you make money ice skating?
Mhm. Money is, yeah, skating is tough because you're spending so much money, and like the elite choreographers charge like $10,000 per program, so you're dropping like a pretty decent size chunk on a new program, and then you have to do two of them. So and then coaching is like coaches can get like upwards of like $120,000 a year, which is like pretty solid for just like standing at the rink for a couple hours a day.
Nathan, so far you've just told us how to lose money ice skating.
Actually,
I know. Okay.
actually, Nathan has told us how to be a choreographer and a coach and not
No,
an actual ice skater.
Yeah, I'm telling you what you can do after comedy.
Yeah.
No, so that's basically like just the expenses of skating are pretty broad. But usually the elite athletes, especially around the Olympic seasons, will have some sponsors come in and they'll support them throughout the year. As well as there's a bunch of different funds and old past skaters, sort of alum skaters who have like donated a lot of money to help young athletes. And then beyond that, it's just mostly coaching and then prize money from winning competitions. And honestly, yeah, it's not super glamorous the amount of money that we make from competitions. We also do shows during the off season, so from around I'd say like May till like July, we'll go and travel and do like little tours and get some money from that, which basically provides for the season.
You just explained why there's Disney on Ice, because there's a bunch of ice
Yeah, ice
skaters.
capades. Yeah.
There's ice skaters that aren't champions, and they're like, I need money. I'm gonna go be Cinderella.
Yeah, exactly.
And what about the Olympics? Do the Olympics pay you?
you don't make money for winning the Olympics, but most of the companies will give you extra prize money, or there are like incentives from the U.S. Olympic Paralympic Committee who will give you like, I don't know, 25 grand if you win or so.
Guys, I hope you're enjoying this episode. I want to tell you about a new beverage I've discovered. It's called Brain Fuel. BREINFUEL. Brain Fuel is a beverage that keeps you mentally focused. It helps you stay mentally focused. It has caffeine, but it also allows you to enjoy the caffeine over an extended period, not like normal coffee that you'll get the jitters or you crash fast. So you take some of this Brain Fuel, you sip it. I continue to have my coffee, but I have some Brain Fuel as well throughout the day. Keeps me going. This was actually first discovered and invented by a surgeon who was in 11 hours of surgery, needed something to keep himself going, needed something to stay mentally focused, created Brain Fuel, passed it on to his son who was at university. His son passed it on to his friends, and they go, wow, this is helping us stay focused longer. So I want you to just try it out, all right? They're teaming up with Back to School to offer you guys 15% off if you go to brainfuel.com. That's BREIN fuel.com. You enter the word school, you're going to get 15% off. Give it a try. I did not stop drinking my coffee because I love my coffee, but Brain Fuel, a little later in the day, like around noon or 1, after I've had my coffee in the morning, this thing helps keep me going, helps keep me steady. Try it. You got nothing to lose. Once again, brainfuel.com, BREIN fuel.com. Read all about it. It's got amazing vitamins and other things that keep you going, keep you focused, give you the energy to go through the day. Enter the word school to get the 15% off. Check it out. See what you think. Let me know. Go. Is there a movement to get Olympic athletes paid? I mean, it feels like the NC2As just said that athletes should be paid. I feel if you're getting 10 million viewers to watch something and everyone's making money, why shouldn't you guys get paid?
No, I totally agree. And I think that's something that should be changed. And at least like, within, I don't know, I can't speak for all the other sports, but within skating, I think there's definitely a component where like we could do better with getting paid, and we're just pretty limited. But I think also part of it comes down to just like how we're marketed, how we're, spread out to the audience, to the general population within the US, because generally speaking, people will be like, oh, cool, the Olympics or skating is on during the Olympics. And that's kind of it. And then after that, there's 4 years in between that we still are competing and we're actively in the sport, but no one generally knows anything about that. And then also like talking about these shows too, like we have all these shows, but generally speaking, like I'll go to California and I'm like, hey, yo, my friends, like there's a show happening here. And they're like, oh, what's that? And I'm like, come on, like there should be more marketing, there should be more advertising. And if like we want more people, if we want more money for the athletes, we have to put more money into the sport. And in order to do that, we have to like, get better marketing, better sort of, just general interest in the sport. So I think there's definitely there's a lot more to that than just being like, we should pay more athletes, because generally like we don't have the money to pay unless there are people involved.
I have some ideas. So you're ice skating.
Yeah.
Amazing, right? And you need more marketing. How about we do this? You're ice skating, we give you sticks, right? And then we throw this little black thing on the skate, right? And you have to hit it. Oh, even better, we have a goal. There will be a goal and you have to hit it in the goal. There'll be someone who will block it. Why don't we call it hockey?
Okay.
Why is that a thing that happens to you all the time where people just go, well, why don't you play hockey? Simply because of the connotation ice skating is feminine, and the patriarchy says that hockey, because you're hitting each other, is masculine. Is that something that comes up?
Yeah, certainly, especially as a male athlete. Like I'm, as a straight male athlete in a fairly, homosexual dominated sport or LGBTQ dominated sport. I think that there is that connotation, and there's like that, like, well, we don't really want to watch guys skate around, and dance for us. We would rather watch hockey, or we'd rather watch, the females do that, which I think is like pretty messed up in itself. You know what I mean? Like we're all doing this, like this is like for us, it's a genuine sport. We spend our whole lives like trying to hone this craft, and then to sort of be belittled like that is not something that like is generally taken lightly. But I think that a lot of my friends who are skaters are trying to, in a sense, change the way that that's approached, just because traditionally speaking, we've always skated to a lot of classical pieces, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think there's like, that's absolutely fine if that's something that you're passionate about and you connect with. That's totally cool. But I think there can be pieces out there, and some of my friends have skated to like more pop or hip hop style songs, and that like generates a lot more interest. Like, oh, dude, this is sick. Like one of my friends skated to "Turn Down for What," and like people like lost their minds at that. And like obviously that's like not like the most like absurd song, but within the skating world that's like already kind of like out there. And I think that just having a little bit more like, oh, this is like, like hip hop, or this is like more of like a dance. This is more of like a dance field that isn't necessarily geared towards, posh sort of ballet style skating or style movement, can in itself sort of generate a little bit or sort of shift that approach to skating.
Just a quick understanding, if someone went to a world championship and they're watching it, J how long? Because I know when you come to a comedy show, it's an hour and a half. So if I come to watch the championships, how long is it? Is it how many competitors, and how long does each competitor go, and how many times do I see you? So if I wanted to root for you, am I gonna get a chance to see you 3 times that day, do 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes? How does that work just to
Yeah,
get my wrap my mind around watching it live?
for sure. So there's basically three opportunities you'll see us in 1 week. Competition generally starts on a Thursday and then ends on a Sunday. And then you'll see us for, so like people can come in for practices, so they'll see us on the ice training for 30 minutes or so in the morning. And then we have maybe a couple hours, and then our actual competition will happen, and we'll have the short program first, which is the first event. And we will have a 6 minute so it's split into groups, and then generally whatever group you're in, you'll have a 6 minute warm up, and there'll probably be about 6 athletes on the ice at that point in time. So we'll have a 6 minute warm up where we'll sort of warm ourselves up, and then it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and only one person's on the ice at that time. So within the day, you'll probably see us for, I would say, like 45 minutes or so.
And
And
each
then
person that's on ice is there a time limit that you have?
So the short program is 2 minutes and 50 seconds, and then the long program is 4 minutes and 10 seconds.
Okay.
And then yeah, so then we'll either have a day off in between, or we'll have a day, or we'll be competing the next day as well. And then it'll be kind of similar, except for this time it'll be 4 minutes 10 on the ice. But throughout the week we'll be there all week training, and sometimes they'll allow our audience in to watch us train, which is pretty entertaining as well. And then at the end of the competition, when the competition is over, we have the exhibition gala, which is like, we'll all be on the ice maybe 3 minutes per skater, and it'll be like with spotlights and more of a theatrical sort of production.
I got you. Tehran asked a Persian parent question. I'm going to ask another Persian parent question. Did you feel any pressure ever from your parents? Because tell us your background in terms of just ethnically. Did you ever feel any pressure from your parents being from that background?
hmm yeah, my parents grew up in China, and they immigrated here around late 20s, and I think honestly they like wanted us to sort of assimilate into American culture pretty quickly, and not necessarily lose the Chinese identity or ourselves culturally, but to sort of just fit in with society. And obviously like that is a little racist in itself. Like we should still be able to feel like we can adopt ourselves. But at the same time, I think that my parents also wanted to like understand American culture a little bit better themselves, and just be active parts of members of society without standing out too much. Um, but I think as it comes to like, just me trying to feel like I have to represent, Chinese Americans, I try not to, put myself in that position, and just recognize that, for me to do anything good for Chinese Americans, it's more just about me continuously trying to put Chinese American faces out there in a sport that's not generally dominated by Chinese Americans. And like prior to me starting in skating, the only real Chinese Americans out there were like Michelle Kwan, she was like a trailblazer for us. Like we were like, dang, like we can actually do this. This is crazy. And then we had Christy Yamaguchi and a couple other Asian American skaters. But for Chinese Americans, it was like Michelle Kwan, and that was the face. But now within every competition, basically top three athletes are mostly Asian athletes in figure skating. And I think that having that sort of shift is super super cool for younger athletes to be like, wow, there are faces out there that look like mine, and if that's the case, then I can do that too. And rather like not really trying to become like the person like, oh look, I'm specifically inspiring this person. As long as I'm like in general like, okay, there's someone that kind of looks like me that's doing well in the sport, then I feel like I'm doing my job.
Representation is important. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, growing up, I didn't see any Iranians on TV. So like I would gravitate towards either Italians or like black artists, because that was
Sure.
to me like the closest to any kind of color.
Sure.
And did your parents ever, because I know you're at Yale now. Another
Yeah.
disappointment. Is that what you are? You're very
Yeah,
disappointing.
sadly.
Were your parents ever, immigrant parents can be pretty tough with, education or dedication to whatever. Were there any moments in your life where you felt like, my God, my parents are pushing me harder than I want to be pushed?
Yeah, I mean, I think yes and no. My parents were, I mean, more so my mom was. She was definitely highly, highly involved with everything that I did, both in school and out of school. But I wouldn't really label her as a tiger mom. You know, I think that she was more or less lenient and like she allowed me to be a kid, have fun, and not feel as though skating was sort of end all be all for my life. You know, it was something that she like wanted me to continue pursuing, becoming good at. And that like goes to say like she still also was very tough on the ice. She would like make me train quite hard. And I think you like as a you know, between the ages of 3 to like 10, like if you don't have structure on the ice, you're not gonna go anywhere in any field. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like quote unquote abusive structure. Like as long as there's like, you know, this is the time that you're on the ice, you have to be disciplined, you have to be on the ice at this time, you have to get this, you know, this number of training, you know, elements in, you have to do these things. Like I think having that sort of structure and then also having quality control, being like your leg wasn't high enough, your arm wasn't high enough. I don't necessarily think that's bad. I think it's actually good as like as a kid to be like, okay, this is what discipline is like. This is how, you know, if I want to be successful in anything, this is how I have to approach it. But I think what was awesome about my mom was that she also wanted me to enjoy the sport, wanted me to love what I was doing, you know, without making you just feel like, oh, this is miserable, like I hate this. And especially when I was really young, she would always like create little games on the ice with me and like make it so it was like I'm playing on the ice rather than me being like I'm here to train, you know. Which I think for me also like when like people ask me like when did you start taking it seriously, you know, I never really felt like I had to start taking it extremely seriously because there was always that sort of play and fun aspect to skating as I was growing up. But I mean, that being said, you know, of course, like with any, and kind of just going back to what I said, you know, like with any sport or any discipline, like if you want to be successful, you still have to have that discipline. And my mom definitely instilled that in me when I was quite young.
Shout out to your mom. That's awesome, man. My mom used to hit me, but that's besides. Listen, what are you gonna do now that you're at Yale as well? What are you studying, and what's your passion gonna be post ice skating? Do you have a passion that's another one?
Mhm. I mean, to be honest, like I spent most of my life in the sport, so it's kind of hard for me to say exactly what my passions are out of the sport. But right now I'm studying statistics and data science, hoping that, you know, I mean, with that was honestly just because I never really explored, and it was kind of like, you know, this is a good field that is sort of applicable to everything. You know, if I wanted to go into medicine, if I wanted to go back into sports, if I wanted to go into finance or whatever, there's like a stats and you know, there's a data science application to that. You know, there's data everywhere, so you know, it's a field that I feel like I could explore like a little bit more once I get out of skating. But I mean, as of now, you know, my future is still pretty TBD. There's a lot of things that I'd like to do for skating that you know I think could be improved in the sport. One from like the marketing perspective, but also just like within the judging. Skating is still a very subjective sport, so I think having a little bit more objectivity with it, using like computer science applications, would be pretty cool. But beyond that, you know, still figuring myself out, and so I'm focusing on this next games, and then after that, you know, I'll spend more time trying to discover what it is I want to do after that.
You're representing us in the Olympics coming up, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah, it should be.
Hopefully you'll represent. Has anyone ever tried to Tanya Harding you? Has that ever? Has anyone tried to be like, yo, we got to take this Nathan Chen out? You're standing in my way. Is that
I
how
mean, honestly,
competitive ice skating is?
I kind of hope so, man. That's how skating got popular at that point in time. You know, people like drama, so you know, if something like that happens, we'll get some viewership.
Yeah.
But no, generally people know they're pretty chill now, and I think that you know, I think the sort of community of skating has just created a pretty like solid, respectful base for one another. And I see like I've seen in the past, I was always worried about skating because I saw stuff like that happen, and I was like, man, like I don't want to be a part of sport like that, you know. But now, like I feel like everyone's just like so genuine, like respectful of the fact that we spend like our whole lives grinding for this sport, and we every single one does that. That it's like, why would we try to screw someone else just for us to be a little bit better when it really, at the end of the day, won't make us that much better, you know? And in turn, we should just focus on ourselves, make ourselves better, and then respect the fact that other people are also doing the same. You know, and I think that's like that sort of thinking that has been fostered in skating is awesome.
I see that it's so I see so many parallels with comedy because you look at the old world of stand-up comedy and there was so much backstabbing. Not to say that there still isn't, but it's a lot less. There's a lot more of like, no, if I do well, he'll do well. So it's an
Right.
interesting world. By the way, did you see the movie with Margot Robbie, the Tanya Harding movie?
I did see that.
What a great movie, and
So good.
what a bunch of bozos. Their whole plan.
I know that whole situation was such a mess.
What
It
a
was it
mess.
was filmed fairly well. I don't know the exact details of it, but it wasn't told terribly.
Yeah, yeah, that was some crazy stuff.
Mm.
Um, Well, listen, man, I am so excited that you came and joined us. I want to say I use the word amazing a lot to say you're amazing, but you really are amazing, and I want to show the world you're actually amazing. That's my
That's
T-shirt. You
awesome.
see that? Uh, I'll get you one of those. I'll sponsor your next race, your next competition. Um, we're gonna do now a segment we call "Back to School" with Nathan Chen. Nathan, I said Nathan Chen. Nathan Chen. Sorry. Back to School with Nathan Chen. I'm so stupid. Sorry. Hold on a second. Okay, Nathan, these are just fast questions about, high school and just quick answers. Let me do that whole part again. I'm gonna have Katarina clean that up because I messed it up. Okay. We're gonna go back to school with Nathan Chan. Boom. Nathan, high school. Were you popular?
Ah, not popular. I was like never in high school, honestly. Like I was always at the rink, so I just like snuck in and left, snuck in and left. So no,
I love that. You weren't even there. Who
I
cares?
wasn't even there.
What's something crazy or stupid you did when you were high school age?
Mm. Honestly, probably nothing really. I was pretty toned down. I
You were
was at the rink all the time.
focused. You should have said, I tried to do a quintuple. What's it called?
I
The
bet, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
great.
What's something you would change if you could go back to that age? What would you change?
I don't know.
Like,
Probably make a little bit more friends. I think socialize a little bit more. Put myself out of my comfort zone.
I'm like, he's a champion. What would you change? We need to change. He doesn't need, you know, he's in Yale. What is he supposed to change? Like, what he was gonna get? What better school?
Besides figure skating, was there anything else you wanted to be when you were in high school?
I wanted to uh, probably hockey. Honestly, I really liked hockey growing up. So maybe like be a goalie. I thought being a goalie was cool, but no, I'm happy with
I've
skating.
always wondered why there aren't more ice skaters in hockey. Like, it'd be so good if someone, because I don't really watch hockey, but I would if someone was doing quintuples or whatever as
No,
they were spinning on the ice and then doing like tricks and backflips and then hitting.
no,
That
I'm
would be
scared.
amazing.
That'd be sick. Yeah, maybe I'll invent that after I finish skating. We'll see.
And maybe you can answer this for me because I've never been able to figure it out. Why do they beat each other up all the time in hockey?
Just honestly, I don't know. For the entertainment, I guess. It's like WWE.
Are you a good hockey player?
I'm okay. I like obviously like I can skate, but stick handling is a little bit difficult for me since I just
Ah.
never really spent that much time developing those skills.
Maybe like Tehran was saying, that's what'll take figure skating to the next level is next time someone's doing the actual thing, you take that Tonya Harding level of fighting onto the rink, you just start beating each other while the
Yeah.
guys.
I promise you, I'd watch ice skating every day. If that happened, I would watch it every day.
Nathan, you are going to be in the Olympics. How old are you now, young man?
I'm 22.
22. I'm proud of you. I'm 49. I'm more than twice your age. I really got to start doing something with my life. I I feel like I'm an underachiever, man.
We all
Um,
are.
listen, Tehran, what'd you learn on the episode?
I learned to move to Salt Lake City. Do not forget that Nathan said in Salt Lake I was, one of the top guys, and then in the country I was top 8. Like that means that the other 7 were also in Salt Lake City at this time. He
Nathan-
downplayed who he was in Salt Lake, but was like, yeah, I was top 8 in the USA, but not one of the top ones in Salt Lake. Like,
Nathan, before I say what I learned on this episode, I actually want to ask you one other question I forgot. When I watch tennis, the difference between the number 1 player and the number 5 player is a world of difference, even though they're the top 5 in the world. Is figure skating similar where like the guy who's number 5 is just never, it's so hard to break into the top 3? Is it similar in that sense?
I would say top 6. No, top 6. I would say almost on any given day could theoretically win, given that we have pretty similar content. I think top 2, top 3 do differentiate themselves a little bit. So we are on average, placing slightly higher just because we have a little bit more difficult elements and our base value of elements that we're doing has a higher point value. But that being said, like we make one mistake, these other guys will beat us. But then I think from top 10, yeah, you will see a little bit more of a difference. But yeah, generally top 6 is like pretty solid.
There you have it. It's tough. It's tough. I'm telling you. What I learned on this episode is that I'm going to learn to be a figure skating choreographer and finally start making the money that I deserve, ladies and gentlemen.
smart. I changed mine to Mazi. That's actually Maz. We're gonna go into business. We're gonna go into business.
Oh,
Right.
3-time world champion, gonna represent us in the Olympics coming up. We got our eyes are on you, Nathan, and no pressure, no pressure. Just be in your zen, my friend. Listen, Nathan Chen, thank you for being on Back to School with Maz Jobrani.
Back to school, yeah.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Back to School with Maz Jobrani. We hope you're enjoying it. We hope you're having fun, and we hope you're learning something. So make sure to let your friends know, share it on iTunes, share the clips from YouTube. Just get it out there. However you're listening, let your friends know to tune in to Back to School with Maz Jobrani.
Back to school, yeah.